Thanks, Alfred. Before we get started, I just want to give a huge thank you and shout out to Francesca and Janara for the work that they've done taking on CAN. As many of you know, Katie Dustin has, used to run CAN for over a decade. And this dynamic duo, along with the rest of the steering committee, have really taken the reins and made it happen. So thank you for your dedication and for allowing Jesse and I to be here with you today. All right, let's get this party started. We asked you all what motivates you to do your best work. Feel free to keep putting it in the chat. But right now, we are going to get started.
Oh, apologies. Yes. So, general methodology for survey here is really, as Shirley said, she developed the program for the first UC Berkeley engagement survey. So we used Qualtrics as our platform. The audience here was, well, all UCB employees with the exception of student workers or academic students. As the title said, this was done in July. Total audience was almost 14,000 and about 3,300 responses and a response rate of 24%, which is not bad on Berkeley campus where everyone has survey fatigue.
So this survey was really intended to measure employee engagement. Now, I don't want to assume that everybody here knows what employee engagement is. So to be clear, employee engagement measures an employee's level of enthusiasm and commitment to their work and workplace. Why does this matter? Because engaged employees produce better outcomes, they remain with the organization longer, and they experience less burnout. If you think about something that you are really passionate about, or that maybe a hobby that you may have, a labor of love type thing, maybe you love cooking, you're not necessarily usually going to feel burned out if you put a lot of effort into these things because you enjoy them. So it's a win-win for both the individual as well as the organization. This survey was developed on the employee engagement model, which touches upon not one, not two, but 12 different elements that we found to be essential for our colleagues' motivation and commitment. And for those of you who like data and information as much as I do, you can see elements of this derived from Gallup, Great Place to Work, Google's Project Aristotle, and Daniel's Pink work on human motivation. So we're going to get started and go through the survey element by element. The first element is clarity. And as we go through these elements, they're not an exact Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it is, they do build on each other, right? How can you expect somebody to be engaged at work if they don't even know what their job is? That's what the clarity element is all about. The employee understands what is expected of them. And if you want to know where your clarity lies, or if you are a people manager, a question that you can ask your colleague or yourself is, what about your day-to-day could use more clarity? So if you're feeling a little lost in your job, reflect on that one. And if you have employees that maybe look a little lost, you can ask them that as well. So how does clarity impact engagement? When employees have more clarity, productivity gains of 5 to 10% more, there are thousands more happy clients, and there are 10 to 20 fewer on-the-job accidents. So even from a very basic level of safety, it's important for everyone to know their job. If you want to know more about how to increase clarity, each of these elements includes a little learn more section, which is a link to more information. So I invite you to check that out at your own time.
So we've got a number of poll questions sprinkled throughout this presentation. And so the first one we have here is, what do you think the total percentage of agreement is with the following statement? I know what my supervisor expects of me to perform my responsibilities effectively. So I'll go ahead and toss that poll in. All right, should be up on your screens. Sure. Okay. I think that's about everybody who's going to be answered here. And actually, what we have results neck and neck here. 35% thought it was 51 to 75% total agreement. And then beating that one out is a 76% to 100% total agreement. And stop sharing here. Shirley, you want to hop on over to the next slide? Q. So yeah, actually our total, this is one of our higher scored questions, and total agreement here was 88%. Those of you who were at the managers forum, you're cheating, but that's okay. So this one did score really well. Average score was 4.32 agreement. And then really a strength behind this whole survey is our total response rates, which is on all these questions, it's at least 3,000. So it's really great. And I have to commend Eugene and Douglas for sharing these results out and then explaining what we're going to do about them. I really credit that for why our response rates are so high.
Thanks, Jesse. And so when we asked folks about what is inhibiting some of this, this is what came up. You spoke, we listened, we got some of these quotes here for you. The disorganization and lack of instructions on how to complete tasks, projects, and timelines efficiently has led to a decrease in my confidence and engagement within my team. Too many times the rug has been pulled out from under me or the goalposts are shifted at the last minute. Ouch. So if you're wondering what has led to some people not feeling like they have high clarity, that's an example of that. We didn't ask these questions, qualitative questions for each question of the survey, but where we did, I've provided some of those quotes there for you. So if you are a people manager, here are some ways that you can help to increase clarity for your employees. You can engage your employees in updating their job descriptions for accuracy and clarity. And I say this because our jobs shift. So, you know, if somebody leaves, all of a sudden people are taking on more work. Now there's role confusion. So that's another way to go about it. You can ensure clarity on, specifically, if you're kind of like, well, what do we need clarity on? Deliverables. What do you expect people to actually provide? The priorities. Sometimes we do so much that how we prioritize our jobs gets a little muddled. Processes change often depending on your role and what you do. So staying on top of that. Stakeholders. Who do you need to collaborate? Who do you need to inform? If you all are not familiar with the RACI chart, I recommend, it's linked here in the slide deck, which will be provided to you after the presentation. I recommend you look at it. It goes over who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. Specific roles in the organization. Again, sometimes there's role confusion. Somebody used to do something because they wanted to help out, and all of a sudden they've taken it on, but maybe that's not actually their job. So being clear on all of these things. And again, you can ask yourself or ask your employees, what about your day-to-day could use more clarity? All right, folks, we're on to number 2, resources. It's hard to be engaged when you don't have the right tools for the job. So resources is really about you having the right equipment, information, and training to do your job. This impacts engagement because if the necessary workplace tools are not appropriately matched to the employee, there can be great costs for the individual, the organization, or both. Think about it. If you don't have the laptop that you need to do your job, that's going to be a problem, right? Again, there's a little learn more section here for you. And feel free to write down in the chat if there are questions that you have or examples where you face this or tips that you have for how to increase any of these elements.
So this was another one that as a whole we scored pretty well on. Average score was agree. So yay.
We got to do the job for the most part.
Yeah.
And ways to increase resources. I want to also point out that although sometimes I will say people managers because that's who we automatically think of, this also extends to project leaders, committee leaders. You know, they're not the only, people managers aren't the only ones who are providing resources. So resources, again, can mean information. But if you are a people manager, Identify what resources are needed for your employees and add them to their job descriptions. That way there's no confusion later on. If you leave the role, if they leave the role, it's embedded there. It has institutional memory. You can share the information, physical space, and tools needed to do the job. And I want to highlight that you should ensure that any tools that you provide to others are ergonomic to the best of your ability, that they're easily accessible, and that whoever is going to have to use them knows how to use them, because it's not enough to just hand somebody tools and expect them to figure it out. So you can also, if you feel like you might be struggling in this area, ask yourself, what equipment, information, or training do I need to do my job most effectively? And perhaps talk to your supervisor to make those resources come into your purview. Now, the third element that we asked folks about is around autonomy and trust. The employee has appropriate flexibility in how to do their job. This is important because we are not children, right? We as humans have a desire for independence. And actually, autonomy is part of the trifecta of the three things that most motivate workers. And these three things include mastery, autonomy, and purpose. If you want to know more about that, check out Daniel Pink's work. In there, he found research, he conducted research and found that workers at a certain point, money is not the main motivator. There are people who will do their 9-to-5 jobs and then turn around and put immense hours into a nonprofit project or their own startup project. Maybe you know some people like this. I have a friend, she started something called Scholar Ahead because she wants to help people, specifically high schoolers and middle schoolers, know about college access programs that can help them get into better Ivy League schools. She is a software engineer at Pinterest. She works a lot, and yet she still finds time to dedicate this, to put more time towards this other endeavor because it fulfills her purpose and autonomy needs.
Right, so we're going to do poll 2 of 4. And same as the last one, total percentage agreement with the following statement. My supervisor allows sufficient autonomy in my work. So I will go ahead and launch the poll now.
Can you all see the poll on my screen? Oh, that's not good.
No, Shirley, yours just has the question. We don't have the results on your screen.
Okay.
So you're good. And then in case you're wondering, we're never going to have 100% of people answering the poll because like 5 of us are co-hosts. So just, yeah. So, but it looks great so far.
Thank you for doing the math for us, Francesca. It prevents me from saying, I know you're out there, answer it.
Yes, exactly right.
Captive audience. Okay, I'm not seeing too much more movement here. So in the poll, let's go ahead and share the results. Bit of a flip from last time. So our highest rated one was 51 to 75%, followed by 76 to 100%.
So most people think that we don't necessarily have, or excuse me, the poll responses for this that just happened don't necessarily think that we have full autonomy in our work. However, Jesse.
This question actually was our highest scored question in terms of total percentage agreements, like 90% of people who responded, and pretty high on our average score, 4.38. It's got a 4.5. We could have said strongly agree, but we'll get there.
Yeah, so that's huge. We actually score very high on autonomy, and I keep just saying autonomy, but autonomy and trust, right? Because once you have your supervisor's trust, they are more likely to give more autonomy. So what are some ways to increase autonomy and trust? If you are a people manager, you can identify what areas, or even, if you're a people manager or even a committee leader or project leader, you can identify what areas your colleagues can't have flexibility in to gauge how much flexibility can be granted, and then provide meaningful rationales and information about where flexibility cannot be granted. And this is very important because we are meaning making machines. And sometimes if we feel like we don't have the flexibility and autonomy to do what we're trying to do, and we're not given sound rationale or reasonings, what are some things that people might start to conclude? You can feel free to put it down in the chat. What is
Here's one you may know, which is what is the recourse here at Cal for the staff who don't feel like they have sufficient autonomy? Or like the last question, feel they don't have the tools and training needed to do their job?
So I would say this is where these reflection questions are helpful, right? So if you don't have the tools, training they need to do their job, ask what tools and information do you need? Because step one is you need to know what it is that you need, right? And then talk to your supervisor or project committee leader, whomever has access to these. And then in terms of autonomy and trust, I would say having a conversation around what it is. First of all, know thyself, right? So what is it that you need autonomy and trust in? And then ask for that. Because it's hard sometimes for people to just assume, oh, you want more autonomy in this regard. There are some things that you can't have autonomy on. Berkeley is a really bureaucratic place, right? So maybe the processes have to be done a certain way, but ask, figure out where it is that you want autonomy and then ask for it. All right, the next element is around recognition. When the employee is recognized for good performance, there are high levels of recognition. And recognition impacts engagement because it helps employees feel valued for their work. It helps motivate people. It boosts productivity and loyalty to the organization. And if you are a people manager or a committee leader of some sort, it reinforces the desired actions to other colleagues. So let's say, have you all actually seen this in action? I'll give you an example of one team where I noticed recognition done. They would have team meetings and they would have a stuffed animal that they would give around, kind of like just alternating. And I can't remember exactly what the categories were, but I think one might have been an owl or something for problem solving. And so at the meeting, they would give someone the owl because they helped them solve a problem or they had a really great idea. So these are things that they wanted to reinforce and recognize their colleagues for. That's one way of showing recognition. What are other ways that you all can think about recognizing each other? Because it's not just managers, it's our own colleagues. How can you show recognition to your colleagues when they do a good job? And if you don't like anybody you work with, how do you like to be recognized? That's harsh. I hope you're recognizing your colleagues. We work with a lot of great people here. Just feel free to put it down in the chat. Saying thank you goes a long way. I cannot tell you how many responses I heard just saying, thanking me for my deliverables or thanking me for my contributions, thanking me for my idea. Ooh, Francesca, yes. Say thank you and CC their supervisor. Oh, you took it to the next level. And their supervisor's supervisor, because well, I'll touch on that in a second. So thank you notes. Okay, telling their supervisor, that visibility. All right, Jesse, tell us about these results.
This is overall, you're going to see these within my team and when I collaborate outside my team type questions. This was done purposefully. Overall, it was an interesting or possibly somewhat disturbing phenomenon that overall, when these questions were asked, say this one, I feel my personal contributions are recognized. Within my team, almost always scores more highly than outside of my team. So people feel more comfortable when they're with their crew. But as soon as you get outside of that realm, people's perception behind this drops. You can see between the average scores here, got an degree on the within my team side. Still technically an agree on the outside my team score, but you got to remember that this is not that far off from rounding down to more of a neutral response.
So I want to just highlight one of the reasons that we asked, or the main reason that we asked these questions and separated it to within my team to outside my team is because Berkeley is such a collaborative environment. I myself, I collaborate more with people who are outside of my immediate team than I do with those on my immediate team. Let that sink in. If you are also in a similar boat, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, can you? Pointing around? No? Oh, you can? Okay, great. If you are also someone who works outside of your team, that means that there's a chance that maybe you are not getting recognized as much. That doesn't feel good, especially if that's where you're spending the majority of your time. So many of you put down thank you notes with the supervisor, thank you notes with the supervisor. I think that is wonderful. The things that made people not feel recognized for their contributions, which is a crappy feeling, consisted of more work that's outside of my scope of practice and no pay increases. Winning an award for a project that someone created, but then their director's supervisor insisted that their director share the award and accept it together. So they felt like that kind of devalued their work. Being frequently interrupted and having their ideas ignored only to then be presented as another's colleagues. That really hurts. Let's give credit where credit is due. So some of the ways that you can increase recognition, and again, I want to stress that we need to start doing this for each other if we don't already. Make it a habit to share kudos that are timely. So don't wait a month to be like, oh yeah, that thing that you did, it was so nice. It helped me so much. They forgot about it. You know, somebody does something nice for you. Try to thank them as soon as you can. Be specific as to how it helped you. So I want to call out Heather's recognition tactic, because she said talking to them about how much their work means to me. That's that specific recognition, right? So you are letting them know what it was that made the difference in terms of what they did. That's huge. Be sure, if there's something that you want to see more of, recognize it. Align the actions, align your recognition with actions that you want to encourage. And Francesca touched on this, make it visible to an audience that cares in an employee's preferred manner. Now, why do I say this, right? Because we are all individuals. Some people do not like attention. So at the next meeting, it might make them feel really uncomfortable if you stand up or, unmute yourself if you're on Zoom and say, Jesse did such an amazing job and he helped me with the survey and I couldn't have done it without him. If Jesse does not like that public attention, I have just done the opposite of my intent, right? I wanted to make Jesse feel good. Now he's feeling uncomfortable. He wants to hide. He might just hide his video. That's not what we want. So make sure that you are providing the recognition in that person's preferred manner. Writing notes, sincerely thanking folks for what they did and how their contribution is tied to a larger scale makes a big difference. And if you yourself aren't necessarily feeling high on the recognition, I want you to reflect on, how do you like to be recognized? And let people know that, because they might not know. So they might be recognizing you in a way that doesn't resonate with you. So something to think about as you get good things, keep thanking your colleagues. Okay, earlier somebody said psychological safety was a way that they felt more motivated to do their best work. It was psychological safety and belonging. I was like, oh, that's two of our elements. So what is psychological safety? It's when an employee feels safe bringing up questions, ideas, or mistakes. And when you have psychological safety, it increases productivity, it reduces turnover, and it reduces safety incidents. Can somebody tell me why they think psychological safety reduces safety incidents? How can psychological safety prevent accidents in the workplace? Some of y'all are like, why is she asking us this trick question? I came to learn about the state of the workplace. I don't know how this ties into the other. Okay, Lois is saying because people are willing to ask for help. Herb, and you can feel free to correct me if I'm butchering your name, Herb, because people will bring up ideas. Heather is saying focus on what they're doing instead of other issues. Yeah, people are willing. People are willing. I'm going to stress that because Lois and Herb both said that. People are willing to bring up issues. So let's say, for whatever reason, you work in an assembly line and you notice that a machine keeps getting stuck. Somebody might, I don't know, get their finger caught in there. If your work environment is not one where you feel psychologically safe, why would you bring that up to your boss, right? Because maybe they don't want to hear complainers. So, in order to get the best ideas from people and to also be alerted to different threats that are in our workspaces, we work better in a psychologically safe environment. It's crucial for that.
Right. So, my opinion seems to count. And again, I'm going to be stressing this over and over again. Within my team, it's a higher score. It's almost exactly the same scores that we got for our prior question, personal contributions are recognized. So both are technically agree, although you could see, again, we're much closer to getting to that neutral scale on the collaborating side of my team versus within my team.
So again, this is a theme throughout our findings where we consistently, as a workplace, score lower when we collaborate outside of our teams. So what is happening outside of our teams where we're not getting recognized as much, where our opinions don't seem to count as much? I want you all to reflect on that and let me know, because it's going to help me do my job and fix this workplace now.
So keeping with the same theme, you can speak up with ideas, questions, concerns, and mistakes without being embarrassed or otherwise negatively treated. And again, this is almost like a copy paste of the last three results. Agree on one side, still agree on the outside of my team, but we're still trending closer to overall neutral. Something I should mention throughout this, as some of you who have attended the managers forum know, we also have breakout questions for these, which cover sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender identity, and disability status. And unless it's noted otherwise, we didn't really see any major differences in our breakout groups. So there'll be a few questions in here that I'll call out where there were some differences, but otherwise, we're not seeing any appreciable differences in our various demographics.
So some things that were not conducive to psychological safety, according to the comments we received, sarcastic comments about people who didn't agree with you right off the bat. Someone else said, after voicing views contrary to the managers in my department, I was excluded from further discussions in groups I had previously been involved in. And a third person said, it is clear that our director wants us to fall in line and do as he says without question. If we question something, it is seen as a personal attack. Ouch. So again, going back to that example where if you see something that can harm somebody, or you have, let's say you have a question about the safety of something, if someone is interpreting that as a personal attack, why on earth would you go and let them know something? Nobody wants to feel that energy. You might still brunt it because it's the thing that needs to get done in order to have a better work environment, but it would be much easier to bring up certain things if these folks were actually more allowing in what they hear. So what are some ways to increase psychological safety? Believe it or not, even if you, oh, and I'm gonna go back to this one. Sarcastic comments about people who didn't agree with you right off the bat. Many people, and it comes up here again, there seems to be a theme here that when people disagree with one another, it shuts down psychological safety. It shuts down sentiments of belonging. So my humble 2 cents is that we as a collective need to be mindful of how we disagree with one another and still value each other, even if we disagree on different things. One way to do that is to appreciate every contribution, every constructive contribution, excuse me, not just complaints, every constructive contribution from your team, your employees, even if their ideas don't provide the solution you need. Why would this be important? Why is it important to appreciate every constructive contribution, even if it doesn't give you the solution you need? Feel free to put it down in the chat. Yes, Chrissy, because it honors their ideas and promotes sharing in the future. Let's say you don't have the solution this time. Next time you might, but if you didn't receive a good reaction the one time you didn't have a good contribution, why would you feel comfortable providing another one in the future? So that limits the ideas that are coming to the table. And we need that diversity of thought in order to innovate and have better solutions, more inclusive solutions for the collective and for advancing our mission and purpose as a university. So thank you, Chrissy and Lois, I see, to encourage engagement participation. Yes, keep it coming, keep it coming. It might not be the right answer this time, but the next one might. Michael valuing teamwork and Ricochet thinking of bigger ideas. Exactly. Might not be the right solution, but it might trigger, it might spark something in somebody else who will have the right idea or one of many right ideas. Sometimes it's not just one right idea. And how do we say, listen and ask questions about why they recommend that instead of shutting down? Great, great. I appreciate you all engaging in this. Ooh, another good way to increase psychological safety, and this especially goes if you are in a leadership position or some sort of influential or authority position, acknowledge your mistakes. When you set the tone and say, oops, I messed up on that, it creates a different norm. It means that it's okay for people to acknowledge their mistakes, and you want people to bring up their mistakes, because when people feel more comfortable making mistakes, it helps them get to more creative problem solving. They've done studies with kindergartners, and it's not the groups that methodically plot out the best strategic plan, and they've done it with adults too. Sometimes it's just trying over and over again will get you to the result. So acknowledging your mistakes, making mistakes, and moving on and learning from them is actually very beneficial, even though sometimes we've been conditioned to believe that making mistakes is somehow something to be embarrassed of. We are all learning as we go. The only reason we know how to walk and talk is because we made many mistakes. So just keep that in mind. And if you don't necessarily feel like you have psychological safety, or if you're wondering if your team or employees do, ask yourself or them, what would help you feel comfortable enough to bring up ideas, questions, or mistakes? Is it in how people respond to it? Maybe you need a platform where you put in your ideas on a form, or you don't necessarily like to do it on the spot, that on the spot brainstorming. So reflect on that. I see a question here, Jeanette, let me go back. What's a good course of action when faculty don't seem open to this? Don't seem open to, which part is this? Psychological safety, mistakes, different contributions, constructive criticism. As staff, while we have a manager who is also staff, we work under 20 faculty who have specific wants and needs. Can you elaborate on the open to this so that I can do my best to answer your question.
Absolutely. Can I just
Yes.
talk instead of, so really it's, the faculty say, we want to be open, and yet it's also bound by, we have deadlines, we have expectations, and it doesn't matter that you've got other things going on. And it's not okay to make mistakes. And when mistakes happen, it's often met with not only harsh words, but sometimes yelling and aggressive words that, I love everything that's being said. It's so powerful and productive in the positive way, whereas, yelling and the negative impact pushes everyone in the other direction.
Yeah. I'm a big believer in, to the extent possible, knowing your audience. I always try to take an individualized approach, and kind of figure out where that is coming from. Is it because they're so passionate about this and the mistake means that all their life's work is going to go down the drain? Is it because, I don't know, they feel like people didn't take enough time and care? What is it that they value? And speaking to that, right? So for example, if it's a mistake that can be corrected, but it was an oversight or it's a fluke, I would stress that. I think it's also important, and I really credit a supervisor of mine during my performance evaluation. Coming from New York, New Yorkers don't do vulnerability, right? Like that's not how we operate. But she, in my performance evaluation, she's like, I always give people a growth area. And she told me basically to be more vulnerable. And I was so confused. It took me a couple of years to get it, but vulnerability actually typically helps bring people together, right? So it's gonna be hard to acknowledge, hey, I made this mistake, I'm sorry, say why, articulate what you'll do so that it doesn't happen again. And also remind them that you're a human being. All of these things, right? You say why it happened, won't happen, apologize. And, it really hurts my feelings when you speak to me in that manner. Moving forward, can you talk to me X or whatever? I know that's hard. That's hard. But if you want my 2 cents, those are my 2 cents.
Jeanette, too, I can give you more of, let's say, the quant perspective here, too, which is we are aware that there's at least a perceived chasm between faculty and staff. Some of the popular opinion staff are more second-class citizens compared to faculty. And I'll just say this has been on the radar, and we are starting to do some development around faculty and staff relationships. Right now it's kind of exploratory, but that is something that we're aware of.
And I'm happy to set up a time and chat as well, if that would be helpful, because sometimes it's hard to address things without having more context. But I'll share my email address after this presentation, so you can always feel free to reach out and put some time on my calendar, and we can brainstorm and strategize. Because again, I don't know who you're working with, and I don't know what works best for them. Okay, I want to make sure we have enough time. So Harumi, is this a quick question?
It was going to be a comment in relation to the last question, because this is something that, as someone working in an academic department, I've had experience. Right now, I'm in a great place. Our chair is very understanding of all members of the team, but that wasn't always the case in the past. And I think it is hard. There is kind of a divide, and depending on the individual, sometimes they won't hear, Shirley has some great suggestions, but sometimes despite you're trying those, you might just not get through to them. And so I would say, trying to get allies with other faculty to help send the message is one of the suggestions that I think has worked for me when I've had challenges with faculty. There are differences where everyone's sandwiched, and maybe trying to explain to them, I know you're sandwiched with your research and teaching this. This is the situation we're in. Can sometimes help with some faculty. Others, you got to pick your battles. So good luck with that, Jeanette.
And I just want to highlight, Rachel Nicholson, hi Rachel, put down here in the chat, if you want to talk about a specific workplace concern in a confidential and informal space, feel free to contact the staff ombuds office at okay, well, I'll read it out in case anybody's not able to see the chat, 510-642-7823. All right, moving along. Oops, there we go. So another element that is important is diversity and inclusion. When the employee feels respected and incorporated in decision-making, regardless of identity, great things can happen. Specifically, employees have a greater readiness to innovate. They are 5.4 times higher. There's 5.4 times higher employee retention. If an organization has high diversity and inclusion, it increases the ability to recruit a diverse talent pool. And diverse companies are, according to one study, were 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. So, you know, we got to beat Stanford. But these are all reasons how diversity and inclusion impacts engagement.
So we'll get on to within my team and outside my team again. And this time, actually, there's not, thankfully, as huge of a difference I'm seeing here. Average score and outside my team is still very firmly in the agree range, and within my team is a little bit higher. But again, remembering that this is a 1 to 5 scale, and the descriptions for it only have, well, 5 responses: strongly agree, neutral, so on and so forth. So this is one of the rare within my team versus outside my team metrics where we didn't really see that much of an appreciable difference, which is good.
But it's still not the same, you know? No, I'm but it is at least agree.
Now we're getting outside of the within and outside my team type questions, but immediate supervisor promotes an inclusive team environment through their actions. And again, this one was pretty much almost spot on to the agree. And again, I love that we have these massive sample sizes. It lets us do something, a lot more things than normal.
So when we ask people what is impacting, you know, your sense of respect or inclusion, and these were some of the things that came up. One person said, most of my colleagues in upper management are white. Not seeing representation in the workplace, especially at the higher levels, makes me feel excluded from that space. Another person said that a team member rolls her eyes when she gives her opinion. A third said that their supervisor does not share information about campus or the team with all members of our team. Ouch, talk about being excluded. You're literally left off the chain, the email chain, potentially. Another person said that they did not invite me to a meeting where I would be the person needing to do the majority of the work. So some ways to increase diversity in research: take and encourage your employees to take the UC Managing Implicit Bias series. Encourage your employees to become involved in a staff organization, such as this one. Ask your employees, what would help you feel more welcomed at work? And I also want to highlight, when possible, when we have good things that are directly from Berkeley, I'm going to highlight those as well, and we do. So some things that help people actually feel more included were when teammates and others on the team invited them out to coffee or lunch. Another person said that they added pronouns to their Zoom name without saying anything, and then they noticed that others started doing the same and they did it correctly. So talk about being seen and having people mirror the actions that you are taking. Another thing is to invite people who are impacted by the project to decision-making meetings, right? We just saw that somebody felt excluded because there was a whole meeting talking about what they were gonna have to do and they weren't even invited. It's kind of insulting, don't you think? So to the extent possible, be sure to include people who will be impacted by a project or decision. Show interest in what is being shared. And again, thanking people for their contributions, even if you disagree with their opinions. let a person finish speaking. I read so many comments about people who were cut off or who just, were interrupted in different ways. And that really limits somebody's sense of inclusion. And I myself am guilty of cutting people off because I try to stick to time. So it's not that I don't want to hear them, but I'm like, we gotta keep it moving. But this will allow me personally to be more mindful of when cutting people off. And maybe sometimes you just have to build in the time to allow for everyone to share their opinion. If you have 10 people in a meeting and it's a big discussion, let's say it's about coming back to campus, don't put 10 minutes on the agenda. You're going to allow people 1 minute to speak if you're lucky. That doesn't make sense. So plot out enough time for everyone to get their thoughts in to the extent possible. So another element is belonging. And this is when the employee is valued for their authentic self. What can help you increase belonging is to think about what helps you feel like you belong. But how does belonging impact engagement? Employees who feel like they belong have better job performance, lower turnover, and they take fewer sick days. Can somebody tell me why they think employees who feel like they belong take fewer sick days? And you can just feel free to put it down in the chat. Yeah, Michael, you don't want to miss out on the fun because they want to be here because they don't dread coming to work. They feel better, less stress, less need to go away. Exactly. So we are social creatures. If we have a good sense of community, AKA we feel like we belong, that actually improves our health. Go figure.
Speaking of which, so I can show up as my authentic self, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and etc. This one was kind of interesting because actually the outside my team, it's not really an appreciable difference, but people outside, or when people were collaborating outside of their team, they, as a whole, agreed that they can show up as their authentic self. So to me personally, just as being the quant who stares at the forest of data and seeing this kind of an interpolation, always been interesting to me.
What came up from our colleagues? Someone said, those with seniority or real friendship with supervisors or managers are treated differently. Someone else said, I was advised to behave in a ladylike and demure manner. AKA, don't be yourself, be like someone else. Someone else said, my supervisor has made it evident that anyone not like her is unwelcomed, which means you can't show up as your authentic self. Someone else said, I was eating lunch with colleagues who were praising Bernie Sanders. I made a valid argument against Mr. Sanders and socialism in general. I was never asked to join them for lunch again. So earlier I mentioned, and I'm going to keep reiterating this, right? Just because people disagree with you does not mean that you have to cut them off. People are going to have a difference of opinion and it shows up in different ways. But it's really impacting our sense of belonging when people disagree. But I think this is a two-sided issue, right? Because one, I think part of it is how we feel when we feel like people disagree with us. And the other part is how people treat us when they disagree with us. So I think it's important for us to keep in mind that even if we disagree, I may like pink, Jesse may like blue. Actually, Jesse, what's your favorite color?
Blue, actually.
Lucky guess. I may like pink, Jesse may like blue. But at the end of the day, that's it. We can still get along. We can still find ways to work together and collaborate and value each other's ideas outside of colors, because I clearly have a bias for pink and, or, actually pink isn't even my favorite color, but it's just just an example. And I did want to touch on part of the reason I put the Bernie Sanders quote in here is because I noticed a few folks feeling like they didn't belong because of their political views. And, it's unfortunate, as much as it's unfortunate for people to feel like, in this case, this woman who was told to be more ladylike, she can't be herself at work. Someone who has a different political view can't be their self at work, right? So it's just something for us to think about as a campus.
Shirley, we have a question from Francesca, and I'll give my 2 cents and then take it away. She says, but disagreeing with your supervisor on how to get the job done is a different issue than disagreeing on ideas about life, colleagues, choice about lunch, that kind of thing. Yes, personally, at least for that example, my take on that, as long as the end result of the job is similar, and I still think it falls within the realm of being able to disagree with your supervisor. If the end result is wildly different from the ask, then that may be an issue. Shirley?
Yeah, I think it is different depending on what the issue is, right? Like, so yeah, to Jesse's point, let's say my boss thinks that we should market an event or a program through social media. And I say, no, we don't have a social media account, or people aren't using our social media account, whatever. I'm using a generic example, right? I'm trying to be relatable to everybody here. We don't even have social media. But let's say I'm like, no, I don't think our social media accounts are the best way to go about it. That is different than, let's say, something that will fundamentally impact the end result. So that's how to market the program. But maybe the end result is, who do we serve? Well, we should only serve first year students. Well, no, I think we should serve all students, or we should only serve senior, right? That gets different because the impact of the outcome can be drastically different. So it does matter. But I'm curious, Francesca, can you give me an example?
Yeah, thank you. Here's the thing, like I totally appreciate that we are, first of all, even tracking whether staff on campus feel their authentic selves or not, right? I think that's a really important question to deal with. And I guess, most of these have to do with, like, if my supervisor and I don't personally get along, next thing I know, I'm being left off email chains. That's a very different thing than, the truth is, if lunch is lunch time. You can eat lunch with whomever you want. Like, I don't owe a single colleague my lunchtime, no matter how I feel about them. But I do owe, no matter who I think they voted for in 2016, when we're in work mode, that we are equal colleagues, right? So this idea of authentic self, at which point, I guess one of my biggest concerns, and maybe we can talk about it after you're all done, is there's a lot of things are like from the supervisor point of view. And I'm really glad that your office is posing these really great questions for supervisors to ask themselves, to take concrete action to ensure that the staff in their units are their authentic selves and can contribute. The thing I guess as a staff member, I always crave from UC Berkeley officially is, what's the recourse for staff when the person they are supposed to talk with about these issues has cut them off already, or has already left them off the chains and stuff like that? And I guess, so there's, and maybe this isn't the place to do it, but that's where I'm more thinking, like, it's not about disagreements, is at which point it's about our professionalism and collegiality, that we can be different, and difference need not be a negative in any unit. That seems to me a little different than, like, man, I don't have anyone to eat lunch with because nobody else here reads Anne Rind or whatever. Like, that's a very different kind of culture for us to do. So I appreciate your office is maybe balancing both, but I'm much more curious about what we can do with the things like senior managements, when they have friendships, there's perception of nepotism, or when my supervisor doesn't want to hear other ideas about the job, and then the fear of retribution for sharing ideas.
Yeah.
And listen, I personally, So far, every supervisor I've ever had on this campus has been awesome sauce. Like, but I've always felt like it on this campus, you either luck out with a supervisor or you don't. And I feel like we got to get to a way to somehow make it so you're not just lucky. So like, this is not my personal beef. I'm my authentic self and I have greatest supervisor right now. I just wish that for everyone here. So.
Yeah, so what you're touching upon is I think kind of what I was saying in terms of we have to do better about disagreeing with people, but still respecting and working and being collegial and professional, right? Somebody wrote there that they rolled their eyes when I gave my opinion, right? That shouldn't necessarily be the case. People should be able to state their opinion and be heard. And so in terms about the lunch, the reason I share this is because this is what came up, right? I'm just giving you the information. I'm not saying that this is widespread, but I think it becomes really unfortunate when, let's say, the difference of opinion in politics or any other thing causes people to start being unprofessional or being uncollaborative. And so that is the big issue. And so ways to increase belonging, if you want people to show up as their authentic self, you can show up as your authentic self. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that happens because once people start being their authentic selves, they encourage other people to do the same. Serve as a fair-minded ally. So if you see somebody being excluded or not included on projects or what have you, for whatever reason, say, hey, so-and-so isn't on this email chain. That's an easy fix. If only half of your team is getting information, say, hey, the rest of our team needs this information. And so a question for yourself, and if you lead folks, whether that be in committee or as a people manager, ask yourself or them, what would help you show up and feel valued for your authentic self? And some things that help people feel like they belong on this campus. I feel like I belong when others ask for my opinion, listen, consider my perspective, and share their ideas back with me. If I had to leave you with one idea, I would say this is by far the biggest one. So many people talked about belonging as just being heard for their ideas, being valued for their ideas. Another person said we're able to joke around about personal non-work topics in addition to our work topics. Another person said dame información, which means give me information for those who don't speak Spanish. Another person said my coworkers spoke up to tell others about my contributions. You feel like you belong when other people are saying, hey, this is what Francesca did. Like, oh wow, I belong. They are amplifying my work, my contributions, right? My teammates back me up when I need help. I also back them up when they need it. Email replies thanking me for deliverables and FYI communications. Ask me how my family weekend was. So if you want to know how to increase belonging, the Berkeley, for folks at Berkeley, these are some examples of what helps people feel that way. Caring. The employee feels cared about as a person. So the way that caring impacts engagement is that employees give more effort in a group when they feel they are more than just a number. When we started this presentation, we asked folks, what motivates you to do your best work? Someone, I cannot recall now because we are too far into the comments in the chat, but somebody said that when they don't want to feel like a cog in the machine. And that's exactly what the caring element is about. You are a human with a sentient human with feelings and emotions.
We can see here that actually we do pretty decently as far as perception of whether or not your well-being is important to you as a supervisor. And again, it's most of these are going to be in the agree realm, which is great for us. This one's fairly firmly in that area.
Some things that came up that impacted people's sense of caring when a manager responded to their mentions of stress, overwork, burnout with, it's temporary. There's nothing we can do right now. Somebody else said, ignoring about 50% of my emails. And another person said being punished for taking sick time. That is rough, right? Some ways to increase caring is to remember the details about colleagues' lives, asking questions about their lives outside of work and following up with them about that. Showing empathy. I can't stress enough just how simple and yet how effective being empathetic is. So this person who said, not responding to my mentions and concerns with it's temporary, there's nothing we can do right now. What they are saying is they were not empathetic, right? Because I guarantee you, this manager is coming at this from some sort of logical sense. Like, well, there's literally nothing we can do right now. But what this person needed to hear, more likely than not, was an empathetic response. That, yes, I'm sorry that things are so stressful. I'm sorry that there is so much work. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do right now. That's that empathy piece. And if you feel like you are lacking in this, ask yourself, what helps you feel cared about? And share that with the people that you need to feel cared about. Other things that happen at UC Berkeley that do resonate and increase caring. One person wrote when they're that they want their manager to advocate more for their department and not allow the opinions of others to dictate how their department should operate. Another person said that they wanted acknowledgement, appreciation of the workload, coverage when new projects arise, going on vacation, etc. Another person said, when I voice a concern, to acknowledge and provide suggestions to resolve it. So don't just listen and say, yeah, that sucks. Actually help them think ways to solve this issue. Show empathy for staff and permit time off. Someone else said that they felt like they were cared about when a coworker reached out to them privately when they expressed struggles with depression. And someone else said, remembering little details about their life outside of work and asking following up questions about them. So Liz is asking a question here. The difference between how was your weekend and how was your son's birthday party, or how did that hike go, or other personal details that most people mention at some point is a real thing to me, at least. So Liz, yeah, you're a perfect example, and Jeanette is agreeing. It makes people feel heard when you remember these details. You're proving my point. Thank you. All this research, it went, it works. So the next element that we talked about is around equality. And this is when the employee perceives a sense of equality to success. Now, when people perceive lower equality, there's lower motivation. When there's perception of higher equality, there's higher motivation. If you want to look more into this, you can look into John Stacey Adams and that theory. And I think this one resonates loud and clear. I think sometimes people leave jobs because they feel like they're not being treated fairly, right? I think that there's almost nothing quicker, maybe being treated poorly, but another strong impetus to leave a job is when people don't feel like they're being treated fairly.
Now we have time for our third or fourth poll. Again, same as the rest. Total agreement with the statement, regardless of my background, I have an equal opportunity to succeed. So let me go ahead. Stop.
And just to honor everybody's time, because it's 11:15 now, maybe we can just take whoever's answered and don't have to wait very long for the polls at this point.
Thank you, Francesca. Okay, so I'll go ahead and end and share the results. And as Steve Harvey says, survey says 51 to 75% was our most popular prediction. And Go ahead, Shirley.
All right.
This one was actually, you guys are right. This one was a bit of a surprise for us, at least. Total agreement here was only 60%. And if you look at the average score here, 3.56, we're only like 0.05 away from this being a neutral response. This is also one of the callouts I mentioned about differences in different demographic groups. And for our employees who answered that they have had or still have some kind of disability, their total percentage agreement with this was 48%. So we're seeing a bit of a difference there between this group and not disabled or other demographic groups. So definitely an area for improvement for us. This was our second lowest scored question in the survey. So this will be a focal point for us.
And an interesting to note, we partnered with Dr. Nemir and data scientist George McIntyre to look at the qualitative responses by demographics. And something that had come up was that's driving the lack of equality is around a perception of favoritism. And when we analyzed the responses, it seemed like people across the board, when talking about favoritism, feel generally similarly around it, right? So this is specifically on the equality question. And when I say similarly, I'm talking about this median line. There's not a lot of huge variation. So that's something that's really interesting for us to see, because it seems like all across the board, folks feel like there's favoritism happening, regardless of race. So some things to avoid when you're talking about equality, assume that you're always being fair. That's your first pitfall. Don't assume that you're being fair, because then you won't be as likely to catch when there are things that are unequal. Things that folks highlighted as being detrimental to equality were plum assignments being disproportionately given to one individual. Another person said that most of the equivalent job rank, men of equivalent job rank have been given promotions and reclassification opportunities because they were assigned full-time employees to supervise, whereas most of the women were only allowed to supervise part-time employees. Another one said, coworker was promoted into a position where others did not even have a chance, an opportunity to apply. And a fourth said, all of the interim managers were appointed during the pandemic. There was no transparency about opportunity. These individuals were handpicked and are encouraged to apply after the role after the interim period is over. Another thing that folks said to help avoid this lack of equality is to promote the talent, not the politician. But some things that you can do in addition to that is to consciously ensure all employees have equal access to opportunities to demonstrate high performance, such as being assigned an important high visibility project, and keep track of whose turn it is so you can rotate them. Another thing is to review and update job descriptions for accuracy, assess if your employees' responsibilities have changed significantly and may need a reclassification review. Contact your HR partner for guidance if you want more information on that. And finally, ask your employees what would enable you to feel like you have an equal opportunity to succeed. I'm going to repeat this question because we scored not so great on equality. Ask yourself, what would enable you to feel like you have an equal opportunity to succeed? Get in the driver's seat, reflect on this, and then see and strategize if there are ways to make it happen. Do you need to talk to your supervisor about gaining more high visibility projects? Do you need to talk to your supervisor about having the opportunity to supervise an intern or a student worker or a full-time staff member the next time the opportunity arises? These are things that you can do proactively to increase this engagement element for yourself. Okay, our next element is around growth. This is when the employee expects to learn and grow in the organization. And growth is really important to engagement because it's the #1 reason people change jobs. It's around career growth opportunities.
So looking at one of our growth questions is supervisor helps me make time to participate in trainings and professional development activities, including staff org involvement like this one. And again, this was one where we scored fairly well on 0.97, well within the agree range.
So some things that help people in this growth area, better organization. People talk about how they can't attend a training if they don't know that they have to complete a last minute project that they had no idea about, right? Model the behavior. If you want people to grow in your organization, on your team, talk about how you yourself are growing and taking advantage of different learning opportunities. People also talked about directing various trainings their way that others might know about. If you have the capacity to do this, create opportunities for people to cross-train. One of the things that I admire that Eugene Whitlock did is we used to have an employee relations team and a labor relations team, and he just combined them because now people have the ability to learn from both sides of what used to be two separate teams. So other ways to grow. We have a whole team and website dedicated to different development opportunities. The People and Organization Development site, which is grow.berkeley.edu, has so many ways for you to grow in your current role or in your career. We even have a career coach for those of you who did not know that will help you with your resume and with interviewing skills. So think about what it is that you want to grow in and talk to your supervisor about it. If you can, provide stretch assignments to individuals, or if you want, ask for a stretch assignment. Another thing that you can do is to reflect on what would enable you to feel, what would help you grow in your career and tailor your approach to that. So purpose and impact. When we first started this, a couple of you said, seeing the difference or the impact that I make. And I was like, yes. Going back to Daniel Pink, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So purpose and impact is huge for employee engagement. It's when the employee can connect their job, their role to a larger purpose. Employees who know how their work has a meaningful positive impact on others are not just happier than those who don't, they're vastly more productive too. This is from Adam Grant, who is a business professor at the Wharton School. And he did a study in which volunteers raised almost not 50%, not 100%, almost 400%, 400% more money than average after listening to a scholarship recipient, because they were able to see the impact that the fruits of their labor had.
In that similar vein, question, I feel my day-to-day work connects to a larger purpose. Again, scored well, always room for improvement, but well within the agree range.
Some things to avoid that came up a lot, just kind of bird's eye view. It's around not having a strategic plan or feeling like goals were never met, right? This person writes, goals are never met or impossible. Another person writes, the overall organizational strategy is unclear. Tasks and projects feel reactive instead of proactive. Someone said they don't feel like their daily work is guided toward any one goal or mission. That's got to be so frustrating. What are you doing? You're just doing things. You have no idea what it's contributing to. So these are some things to avoid. If you want to increase growth, have a strategic plan, even a project charter. If you are a project or a committee leader, if you need a strategic plan, you can work with a pod consultant. That's the People and Organization Development team within People and Culture. Communicate the strategic plan for your department or team and where you are in terms of progress. Sometimes you have a strategic plan, but if you don't communicate it, people might forget, or they might just get so caught up in the day-to-day that they lose sight of the bigger picture. You can reflect on how you see your work connecting to a larger purpose, and you can also ask your employees, how do you see your work connecting to a larger purpose? And you might need to help them connect the dots. What you can do is, from UC Berkeley employees, they are saying projects and programs should be related to the long-term goal, not the newest shiny thing and then on to the next thing. Somebody else mentioned it would help if there were focused goals with projected outcomes. Yes, what are you expecting to see? Did you hit your mark? Did you not? People want to know the impact of what they do. A task calendar or any kind of forward-thinking written document with the repeated work cycles would help following existing processes and evaluating them for strengths and weaknesses. Not only do people want to know, did we hit the mark? How can we do better next time? And our last engagement element is trust in management. This is when the employee trusts the organization's leaders. When people trust their management, there are higher levels of employee retention, higher overall workplace satisfaction, increased willingness from employees to recommend their company, and more motivation to give extra effort at work. Some ways to increase trust is to build positive relationships, demonstrate good judgment, expertise, listen. I can't stress this enough. Part of trust is feeling like people think that you care about them. And one way to do that is to actually listen to what people are saying. Share information and to involve employees in decision-making.
Shirley, I think maybe in the interest of time, for us to have enough time for Q&A and that kind of thing, let's just go ahead and skip over to the next slide.
Okay.
So this was another comparison, except for it wasn't within versus without, or within my team and outside of my team. This was trusting your immediate supervisor, which we did score very well on, versus I trust our campus leaders, which was very firmly in the neutral category. Anecdotally, this did surprise me a bit, but thinking through it a bit more, myself, it would be hard for me to think that I trust campus leaders if I don't really even know that much about them. They're kind of in that air is, you know, they're up there where the air is rare. I'm down here kind of boots on the ground. This could also be a terminology issue, because we've had prior reports where it said, you know, I trust UC Berkeley is doing the right thing, either around managing change, keeping us informed, especially during the pandemic. So I think the term campus is a much friendlier term than, say, our campus leaders, where this might be evoking images of the 1%, the fat cats, the CEO, that kind of thing. So again, worst scored question, only 52% agreed with this one. So another area for us to focus on.
Yes. Some ways to increase trust in management: share information that will help employees see the larger picture, gain input from your team on upcoming decisions, and also ask your employees, what actions can leaders take to increase your trust in them? If you'd like to see the nitty-gritty breakdown of everything, we've linked the full report here for easy reference, but at this time, we will take any questions that you may have.
Yes, I have a question using my my privilege as the CAN co-chair. I wanted to ask, well, first of all, this is huge, and I'm so glad you are, you know, bringing up employer engagement, and this is amazing. So my first question is, what percentage of employees on campus are managers and supervisors? And secondly, what kind of training are you offering to supervisors, considering that, you know, they're very busy, and also a lot of this data, I think, is important more for them rather than for the direct reports, because I feel like, you know, then it puts it on us. You know, we have to manage up again. You know, like, so like that's that's just like my first, you know, thoughts. So. Yeah, there. Thank you.
So I can speak to the training piece, and Jesse, I hope you can speak to the numbers piece, because I don't know it. But in terms of how we're training supervisors, we have several opportunities for managers and supervisors to be better. And actually for everyone, you know, even if they're not a supervisor or manager, because the best time to train and prepare to be a manager is before you start managing people. So we have the the Berkeley People Management Program, and that is run by Kathy Mendonça. It's a very robust program. We also have the BPM Executive Coaching Program that our managers can go through. Jesse, do you know numbers by any chance? And Janara, the trainings are not mandatory. However, I do
Sure.
believe that we are making one part of the trainings mandatory. You know what? Don't.
I believe it's the implicit bias one. I think managers are required to take at least one of those, otherwise they're not allowed to be on the interview panel.
Yeah, and that is part of our BPM Grow Today series. So kind of mandatory, but no, they're not mandatory. Oh,
Yeah.
and for the rescue.
Tim, thank you, sir. One interesting piece about that too is that we have supervisor and manager titles, which is the number that Tim quoted. There's another field in Cal Answers, that's the who do you report to field. It's a much larger percentage than just looking at the titles themselves. So I get questions often about, can I get a mailing list of all supervisors and managers? And I have to make that differentiation, which is titles or just if someone appears in that reports to field, because it'll get very different numbers.
And if you have a question, you don't want to ask it out loud to everyone, you can also direct message myself or Jesse, and we'll read it anonymously. Because we want to promote that psychological safety. So, but in the interest of time, thank you all so much for your time and hopefully some of your attention throughout this hour and a half. If you want more ideas, or if you want to assess, create, or implement, maybe even refine an employee engagement strategy and increase your team's motivation, whether you are a people manager, committee leader, or meeting facilitator, feel free to email me at shirleyg@berkeley.edu.
Thank you. Could everybody please join me in thanking Shirley and Jesse for a wonderful and informative, this is a big, thick bear of a survey, and there's a lot of information there. And so not only was it useful for all of us to walk through, but to start to get a hint of the ways P&C is going to start to use this data, at least for training management and supervisors. And I appreciate Shirley's point, like leadership takes many forms. So sometimes just, you're the one moderating a meeting that you've called, like then you're in a position of leadership as well, right? So I really appreciate that part. To honor everybody's time, I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes if people want to stick around and have other questions. If you got a splitsies, we're going to be posting, we can stop the recording now if we haven't already. Alfred, thank you.